Welcome to the Clever Cow Podcast, a University of Idaho ISAID Grant podcast. ISAID stands for Idaho Sustainable Agriculture Initiative for Dairy. Greetings, dairy enthusiasts, agri-innovators, and eco-conscious minds. I'm Savannah Nunes, the Media and Communications Director for the ISAID Grant, and I am joined by co-host Mireille Shaheen, a University of Idaho Extension Dairy Specialist who also works on the ISAID Grant. In this episode, we delve into the heart of ISAID Grant's groundbreaking research, transforming dairy waste into valuable resources. Mireille and I will be your navigators, bringing you interviews with industry professionals, researchers, and agricultural pioneers. Together, we'll uncover the innovations shaping the dairy bioeconomy. So tighten your cow print boots, grab your favorite mug of milk, and let's embark on a journey to discover the ingenious and sustainable practices shaping the future of dairy on the Clever Cow podcast. Well, welcome to our podcast, The Clever Cow, the University of Idaho ISAID Grants podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Nunes, and
I'm Mireille Shaheen, Extension Dairy Specialist at the University of Idaho.
So my position for the ISAID grant is I'm the Director of Media and Communications. My purpose is to educate the public, stakeholders, dairy producers, and any other ag professionals interested. I do this through our social media accounts, website, podcast, and our YouTube channel. I also use photography and videography and graphic design to educate people about the grant, the dairy industry, and overall sustainable agriculture.
And I'm a professor and an extension dairy specialist. And with the grant, my job is to lead the extension efforts, which is really to transfer the knowledge, the research findings to our stakeholders.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of background about myself before I was hired by the university. I grew up on a dairy in southern Idaho, and I really immersed myself in the dairy industry from a very young age. I was involved in 4-H, FFA, and after high school, I attended the University of Idaho and graduated with a degree in agriculture economics. At this point, I had also been doing photography and videography for about 6 years, and I started managing social media accounts and building websites for ag businesses in the Twin Falls area. It's very rewarding to be able to work for my alma mater and help advance the dairy industry in the state of Idaho and beyond.
And I think it's awesome that Savannah actually has the background in ag and also has the background in communications, because that's an important job, I think, to transfer, whatever we do in ag to the general public in addition to the producer. So I'm really happy that you're part of the team. So
thank you. So I guess we can start getting into what the ISAID grant is. So ISAID is an acronym that stands for Idaho Sustainable Agriculture Initiative for Dairy.
Yeah, and this grant is funded by a Sustainable Ag System USDA grant. It's a $10 million grant, and it's a relatively long-term grant. It's a 5 years grant, and it's an integrated grant, which I think the impact out of these grants are impressive, because they include the three legs of the of the land grant university. So they do have a focus on research, but also on extension and education. I bet we'll go through that later, but I just wanted to note that.
So, if you didn't know already, Idaho is the third largest dairy producer in the nation. This is a huge accomplishment, and the dairy industry brings in tons of money for the state. Most of the dairies are located in southern Idaho, and this high concentration causes some challenges with dealing with liquid and solid manure. The main issue is there are excess amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil and water from applying too much manure. The plants can't utilize all of the nutrients because it's too much all at once, so the nitrogen and phosphorus turn into runoff, and as a result, this can cause some pretty devastating environmental problems. But we have a solution for everyone, from dairymen to environmentalists. The ISAID grant has found a way to harness nitrogen and phosphorus from manure and turn it into valuable bioproducts. These products are biodegradable plastic, soil amendments, and clean water. Yes, you heard that right, biodegradable plastic. This is huge for the dairy industry. It literally could create an entire new commodity and in turn increase the value and price dairymen can get for their excess manure. Another product is manure to soil amendments. We are using biochar and hydrochar with manure to create a natural fertilizer that can be cycled back to the crops in a slow release form. This will feed the plants for longer, increase water retention, growth, and it also doesn't cause salt buildup like traditional manure. You've probably seen yellow stunted corn, and salt buildup is partly to blame for that. Lastly, the Clean Water Machine is a patented machine that University of Idaho engineers created, and it is a tertiary filtration process. So, if you're like me and have no experience with wastewater management, I'm going to break that down into simple terms. The manure liquids will be separated from the manure solids using a machine like a digester, and then another machine will refine it further. The third step, our Clean Water Machine, uses sand filtration, ozone, and possibly reverse osmosis. They can literally turn manure into drinking water. Wow. Now, you might not want to drink it, but it could also be recycled back into the dairy farm for the cows and also be used for irrigation, which is a huge step for places that have a lot of drought. The act of cycling the products back into the dairy industry is what's known as a dairy bioeconomy. Everything works together to be reused and repurposed for the benefit of producers. Basically, everything is going in a circle through the dairy industry. Now, if you're interested in seeing what this model looks like, I'll link it in the show notes and you can see the diagram that we've made.
The goal of the Clever Cow podcast is
to spread knowledge about the dairy industry and the ISAID grant in an easy to understand way.
So we want to educate you more about dairy sustainability, and we're going to be talking more about what our grant is, but we're also going to be interviewing industry professionals to get you a little bit more information that you might not have access to or the ability to reach out to those people. So yeah, this first episode is mainly an introduction and telling you about what our vision is and telling you about the grant. And then episode 2 will be an interview with one of our members about the science in composting.
So maybe, Savannah, I don't know if we have chance to just explain how important is the dairy industry to the state of Idaho, at least. And, Idaho has seen an impressive growth. I'd say it's one of the fastest growth in the nation because around 30 years ago, Idaho was not even in the top 10. And consistently, and in less than 25 years, we actually increased production. And we have been for years number 3 nationwide in milk production. So the dairy industry is most of the years the number 1 ag industry in the state of Idaho. So it's a very important industry to the state.
Definitely. It's huge. It brings in tons of money for the state. And another big part of that is the amount of manure that's being created. So dairy manure is the central point where the ISAID grant focuses on. And specifically in southern Idaho, that's where the dairy is the most dense in our state. To be able to use that resource in an area where a lot of it is coming out of is just, it's amazing. And especially for the sustainable dairy industry, the dairy industry has made a pledge to be net zero by 2050. So that's a big undertaking.
Yeah, and just following up on that, one of the numbers I like to use is like a lactating cow produces around 150 pounds of manure.
Wow.
So if that cow is producing 100, let's say 75 or 100 pounds of milk, it's almost producing double the amount of manure. And just to make it even more interesting, both manure and milk have the same amount of solids. So it's like both of them are 87% water. So actually, for this grant, one of the unique point of this grant is looking at manure as a resource. We really do not have to look at manure as a waste stream, and that's where the whole dairy bioeconomy is related to this grant. So.
Definitely, yes. As far as like perception goes, I would say like the general public, when they think of dairy manure, they do think of it as a waste. I know dairymen definitely see the value that it has, and it's really cool to be able to add even more value to that product.
Yeah, especially like if we look at sustainability, a circular economy. I mean, for example, just to give you an example of phosphorus, phosphorus is mined in a way that's not even sustainable because it's a limited resource. While at the same time, we have that huge amount of phosphorus in the manure. So there is a huge opportunity to be able to reuse those valuable nutrients and from that biological product.
So phosphorus and nitrogen are really, really good resources. But one of the things that is hard is that if you have too much of it, it's bad for the plants. They can't take it all in, and basically the plants will take what they need, and then the rest of it will kind of just go into the environment, and it could get into water and cause algae blooms, and it can cause some pretty bad environmental disasters. So to be able to take what we need out of it and give it to the plants in a way where they can take all they need and it's not a bunch of excess, that's really impactful.
Yeah, and one of the things that limits us is that 87% water. Like it typically doesn't make sense to ship water. It's not economical. So if there is any way to figure out how to concentrate those nutrients so we can or transform them or separate them to be able to transport them longer distances, because we do have even in the state areas that do need those nutrients, I think that will make a huge impact on the environment as well as economically, because at the end, you and I, we know that to be sustainable, a practice needs to be economically sustainable as well. If not, people are not going to adopt it. So
Definitely.
I think this is one of the point, and this is something that's going to have a huge impact for the futures.
I mean, for our area, it's pretty easy for farmers to get access to manure, but in a lot of other parts of the country, it's hard. And you have the shipping with the water that you just mentioned, and yeah, it becomes very unsustainable. So to be able to turn that into a different kind of form that's easier to ship and easier for people to get access to, and even more potent, so you don't have to apply it as much, maybe once every 10 years, or depending on like the rotation of your crops, to make it efficient for you, so you're saving money and getting the most bang for your buck when you're doing that. I'm talking from a producer standpoint, I guess, with that. But yeah, it needs to be economical for sure. Sustainability is great, and I think it needs to be pushed, but it has to be economical for everybody, or else, I mean, you can't do it for long term. It has to make sense for everybody.
And maybe a philosophical note, food is the only thing we cannot live without. And I really think we forget the importance of producing food. This is a very important point. And I think really people, because less, around less than 2% of people produce food, there is that disconnect, and people just don't understand how food is produced, and that really farmers, and most of the time, are stewards of that land. And if the land is not working for them, then actually that's their livelihood. They're just going to lose, and they're not going to be able to sustain their farm. So I think it needs to be a win-win situation. And that's, again, the whole objective of this is to make it economically sustainable and environmentally sustainable.
So I guess we can start talking about the objectives and goals of the ISAID grant. So we talked a lot about sustainability, and we got into a little bit of the research side of it. But there's also some other parts of the ISAID grant that we're working on. So there's the graduate student side.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is an integrated USDA grant. So a part of the grant is also working with undergraduate and graduate students. And we've done quite a work already with graduate students. And our objective is to develop a workforce that is capable of working with that new bioeconomy surrounding manure. So we do have between 20 and 30, the number keeps changing, graduate students at the master's and PhD level. And it has been a great experience because some of them had not been on dairies before, and we've done some dairy visits. I think they understand the production systems better, and they all bring a unique vision, a small maybe advancement to science and the puzzle, but that's, in my opinion, is what really makes a big impact at the end. So they're great scientists, and it's a really interesting and to work with them.
So you did mention a little bit about the undergraduate students as well. So on this job, we're usually interacting with the graduate students. But what's actually pretty cool is when I was going to the University of Idaho, I was majoring in agriculture economics. And for my capstone, I actually made a business plan for the clean water machine, which was really cool because, I wasn't sure how I would use it long term for my career, I guess, but it ended up being perfect for my job because, it was just meant to be. And it's really cool to be able to see that side of it. So, other people that are other undergraduates who are doing that and seeing different sides of it from an economic perspective or natural sciences, it's definitely very vital, and it's really cool to be a part of something as big as this.
Yeah, and we also give the opportunity. We have tons of temporary workers that are undergraduate, and that gives them the insight of seeing how research works. And a lot of them would know early on whether they like research or not, and they decide whether they want to go to graduate school or not. It's very important. So.
Definitely. Yeah, so I guess we can start talking about dairy bioeconomy. When I first got into the grant, when I first heard that, it was really intriguing. And I guess you can split up the words and kind of understand what it means, but it's really cool once you start realizing that, circular bioeconomy, that's like the most sustainable kind of system that you can have. And to have a dairy one where basically all of our products that we're creating from manure will cycle back into the dairy industry and create a circle. It's amazing. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, bioeconomy, we're using biological resources and we are reusing them. So really that it is one of the highlights of this project, and it's a unique aspect of it is that we're really adding value to manure and building a whole bioeconomy around it.
And like I mentioned before, the dairy bioeconomy model can be found in the show notes below. I guess we'll start getting more into the weeds of turning dairy manure into different products. So I mentioned a little bit before the 3 kinds of products we're turning dairy manure into. And in later episodes, we'll get really into the science of this. So this is more of a general view of what we're doing. So I guess the first one's clean water, from dairy manure into clean water. They invented this machine. So after running manure through digester to filter out more of the solids, they run it through this clean water machine that they invented, and it uses sedimentation and filtration. So it uses different kinds of sands to filter out the manure more. So basically it compacts the manure solids into bigger pieces so that you can take it out. And then it also uses chemical treatments. It uses osmosis to destroy the pathogens. Your end result is sterile water, and they actually can even go one step further and use reverse osmosis, and you could drink it, which is very crazy to say, that you start with dairy manure, filter it in all of these different scientific ways, and then if you even go that next step further, you could even drink it. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. That's really one of the amazing things is that wouldn't be amazing in the future if we just take that dairy manure, suddenly we can return the clean water, to the river or to our natural resources, or drink it or use it for irrigation, etc., at homes, and at the same time use the power of those nutrients in manure. I really think that this is the future, and we're working on making it happen.
Yeah, the main uses would probably be, since it's taken from dairies, they'd probably put it straight back into for irrigation and such like that. So, and they're able to take the nitrogen and phosphorus out of it. You were talking earlier about how hard it is to get phosphorus. You have manure, which is basically a renewable resource in this area because there's so much of it. To be able to create those products out of it is, yeah, it's revolutionary.
I agree. And I think that's where we're focusing. I mean, and the team is focusing right now in making it happen in an economical way and at a scale that would be relevant to dairy producers. And people complain a little bit that it takes long time to do things. And we tend to forget that science is in a way slow because it really needs evidence. So small steps, I think, will lead us to very important impact at the end.
The other product that we're making from manure is bioplastic. And this one is very hard to understand. There's a lot of science with it, so we'll get more into it later, but I guess a general explanation is basically they have this manure and then they add microorganisms that eat the manure, and then they excrete this certain kind of substance. They're called PHAs. It's a really long word. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but they excrete that, and then those PHAs are what can be turned into biodegradable plastic. And when you think about making biodegradable plastic from dairy manure, it is just so cool. And I mean, it goes so far. I mean, think about like any single-use plastic, even for shipping. I mean, you have garbage bags that you could turn it into. Even you go to like the greenhouse and your plants come in those containers and you can make biodegradable plastic for that. So it's just really eliminating a lot more waste.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this is it adds another stream of revenue potentially to a dairy. And the way, again, potentially or personally, I look at this is there is not going to be one solution to our issue because the issue we're dealing with is complex. So it needs to be multiple solutions to it. And this is very promising because, again, it's helping us use manure, but also bringing money, so impacting positively the economics and the bottom line, really, of the dairy farm. So
definitely. I mean, the amount of jobs that entire market will create for bioplastic is crazy. I mean, that'll be tons and tons of jobs. And it's just hitting so many points. It's hard not to get really excited about this stuff because it's so cool. The next product we're making from manure are soil amendments. So we talked earlier about taking the phosphorus and nitrogen out of the manures. We're also using hydrochar and biochar, adding it to that manure so that the plants have more access to it. So biochar and hydrochar are really cool. They do tons of really cool things. They make it so plants can receive nutrients. They make like water retention better. It's overall, they just do tons of things. And we're still testing this stuff, so it's still kind of in the oncomings.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the impact on soil health is significant. Lots of research being done. We also have a soil scientist that will join us one day to talk about this. And there are even some people testing feeding biochar to the cow because it does seem to have an impact even on rumen fermentation. So there are lots of potential use for it. And really the lowest hanging fruit, I'd say, is its impact on soil health. And I think one of the important things is also optimization of the other more traditional products as well. So, for example, lots of people worry about maybe, as I mentioned, transporting those nutrients. And so compost also play a very important role. And the issue with compost is sometimes maybe the amount of emissions that some people have seen associated with it, but there are different management practices that would allow us to retain those nutrients in compost. So there is quite a bit of research going on there that Savannah will explore in the future. And also as cover crops is another practice, because what cover crops will help is also remove some of those nutrients in the soil. So if you notice, we're really using a systems approach to deal with that very complex issue, and hoping to have, at least advanced science out of this grant. So.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start getting into the ISAID Grant team. Just a heads up, we use the term PI a lot when we're talking about our faculty that are working on the project. PI means principal investigator, and each of them are assigned to different teams based on their research focus. The teams we've put together are bioproducts, soil chemistry, agronomy, economics, extension, and education. Now, it's important to keep in mind that we are operating from two separate sides of the state of Idaho, and the collaboration within the grant spans multiple disciplines. The departments working on the ISAID grant are soil and water systems, plant science, ag econ, animal vet food science, social sciences, chemical and biological engineering, extension, and agriculture education, leadership, and communications. All of these different teams and disciplines work together for a sustainable dairy bioeconomy.
Dr. McGuire is the principal investigator of the grant. He is also the associate dean of the College of Ag and Life Science at the University of Idaho and the director of the experiment station. He's really a distinguished professor. He has a lot of very important career. I'd say he's a top-notch scientist. And he really had that vision to bring together a very diverse group of researchers. And this is, I think, the uniqueness of those grants is the time for faculty to be in their own silo is, I think, way gone because we're dealing with those complex situations. So what we see in this grant is, I'd say, professors, faculty, researchers from almost all the departments in the College of Ag and Life Science, as well as from engineering, because again, they each bring a different point of view and different way of thinking that will help address some of these complex issues. So, but yes, Dr. McGuire leads the effort, and he also leads the research effort. And then, the different projects are led by the different co-PIs under this grant.
Our team is very multidisciplinary, and it's so cool to have all those people who come from different backgrounds and different areas of study collaborating to meet a common goal.
Yeah, and one of the coolest thing I think is also having social scientists, because it's very hard to do a research evaluate the impact of our research if we do not look at its impact on society. So we have some very good social scientists that also are looking at the social impact of that dairy bioeconomy model that we're working on. I really feel the excitement about this grant, and I really think that we are going to be able to advance science, and I'm really looking forward to the results of the research and the implementation of the management practices that we're going to find.
I want to thank everyone for listening to the first ever episode of The Clever Cow. We talked about what the ISAID grant is, the dairy bioeconomy model, the different bioproducts the ISAID grant makes, and we had an overview of our multidisciplinary team. On our next episode, I'll interview ISAID member and University of Idaho Extension Specialist Mario De Haro Marti about the science behind composting and his compost reactors. To give a little teaser, his experiment is the biggest simulation of composting in the United States and maybe even the world. Tune in next time to learn more. Be sure to check our social media for announcements about future episodes. You can find the links in the show notes. Thanks again, and start getting excited about composting.